Evan zoomed through the airport like a tiny rocket. His plane was leaving soon, and he was very, very late. Each step made his big blue backpack bounce up and down, thumping against his back. He had to get to gate B12, and it felt like it was a million miles away. The airport was a giant maze of people. Grown-ups in suits walked fast, pulling shiny suitcases on wheels. Families with little kids moved slower, sometimes stopping to point at the big airplanes outside the windows. Evan felt like a tiny fish swimming against a strong river. He said, "Excuse me," a lot, sometimes just a loud puff of air as he squeezed past. His heart thumped like a drum in his chest. He looked at the big clocks on the walls. Each tick-tock sound felt like it was stealing precious seconds from him. 10 minutes, he thought, his eyes wide. Only 10 minutes until the gate closes. He pictured the airplane, a giant metal bird, waiting for him. He couldn't miss this flight. It was very important. He ducked under a man's arm, then swerved around a lady pushing a cart full of snacks. The smell of coffee and warm cookies filled the air, but Evan didn't even notice. All he could think about was running. His shoes squeaked on the shiny floor, a quick, hurried sound. He saw signs pointing to different gates, big yellow arrows that seemed to mock him. B1, B2, B3, where was B12? He gripped the strap of his backpack tighter. Inside, he knew his passport was safe in a special pocket. He had checked it 3 times before leaving home. It was the most important thing. Without it, he couldn't get on the plane. He patted the pocket quickly, just to make sure. Yes, it was there. He felt a tiny bit better, but only for a second. Then, a sudden bump. He had crashed into someone, a tall man who barely wobbled. "Oh, sorry," Evan gasped, not even stopping. He just kept moving, his legs burning, pushing himself faster. He felt a little dizzy from all the running, but he couldn't stop now. He was so close, he just knew it. He could almost see the sign for his gate, just around the next corner. The sounds of the airport, the announcements over the loudspeakers, the rumble of bags, all blurred into a big, loud hum. He was a blur in a sea of slow-moving people, a streak of urgency in a world that seemed to move too slowly. Evan pushed past another group of people, his breath coming in short, quick gasps. His gate had to be just ahead. He stretched his neck, trying to see over the heads of everyone, when suddenly a hand clamped around his wrist. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a firm, warm grip that stopped him dead in his tracks. His momentum carried him forward a tiny bit, pulling against the hand, before he was yanked back, surprised and annoyed. He stumbled, almost tripping over his own feet, and spun around. "Hey!" he snapped, ready to tell whoever it was to let go. He was already so late. This was the worst possible time for someone to stop him. He expected to see a grumpy airport worker, or maybe a parent whose child he'd accidentally bumped into again. He imagined a stern face, ready to scold him for his rushing. His head snapped up, his eyes blazing with irritation. He was ready to shout, ready to explain his desperate hurry, ready to pull his arm free and keep running. His mouth was already open, forming the words, "I'm really late." But the words caught in his throat. The person holding his wrist wasn't who he expected. It wasn't a scowling face or a pointing finger. Instead, he met the gaze of a stranger. A man, taller than him, stood there with a calm, steady look in his eyes. His grip on Evan's wrist was firm, but not mean. It was a surprising touch, a sudden warmth that cut through Evan's frantic rush. Evan blinked, his anger fading into confusion. Why was this person holding him? What did he want? Evan looked down at his wrist, then back up at the man's face. The man wasn't yelling or looking upset. He just stood there, holding Evan's arm, and in his other hand, Evan saw something small and blue. Something familiar. His eyes widened. It was his passport. His precious, important passport. The one he had just patted his pocket to check. The one he couldn't fly without. He must have dropped it when he bumped into that tall man just moments ago. A cold wave of fear washed over him, quickly followed by a rush of relief so strong it made his knees feel weak. He had been so close to losing it, to missing his flight for good. He looked at the stranger again, his annoyance completely gone, replaced by a dawning gratitude. This man hadn't stopped him to scold him. He had stopped him to save him. The grip on his wrist still hadn't loosened. It was a strange moment, suspended in the noisy chaos of the airport. The stranger's eyes held his, a silent message passing between them. Evan stared at the passport in the stranger's hand. It was indeed his, the little blue book with his picture inside. He could feel the blood rushing to his face, part from the running, part from the sudden shock of almost losing something so important. He'd been so careful, he thought, but in his hurry, it must have slipped right out. The stranger, a man with kind eyes that seemed to hold a quiet understanding, still held his wrist. It was a firm, gentle hold, not hurting but very real. This man was not the angry person Evan had expected. Instead, his face was soft around the edges, and his eyes, a warm shade of brown, looked at Evan with a mix of calm and something else Evan couldn't quite name. His mouth was set in a small, gentle curve, almost a smile but not quite. He wore a simple, light-colored shirt, and a small, silver watch glinted on his other wrist. He looked like someone who wasn't in a hurry, someone who had all the time in the world. Evan felt a strange warmth spread from where the man's fingers met his skin. It was a surprising feeling, like a tiny spark had jumped between them. He had been so caught up in his own race against the clock that he hadn't noticed anything else. Now, stopped by this stranger, he felt like a puzzle piece that had finally been put in the right place, even if only for a moment. The man didn't speak. He just held Evan's wrist, offering the passport with his free hand. His gaze was steady, not pushy, not demanding, just there. Evan's mind, which had been buzzing with flight numbers and gate announcements, suddenly went quiet. The loud sounds of the airport, the rolling bags and distant voices seemed to dim around them. It was as if a bubble of silence had formed around Evan and the stranger. My passport," Evan finally managed to say, his voice a little hoarse from running. It sounded small in the vast airport. He reached out slowly, his fingers trembling a little, to take the blue book. He felt a sudden shyness, a weird feeling he hadn't had in a long time. This stranger, with his kind eyes and steady hand, had saved him from a big problem. And in doing so, he had stopped Evan's world from spinning so fast, if only for a breath. The man, Marcus, as Evan would later learn, simply nodded, his eyes still fixed on Evan. He didn't let go of Evan's wrist right away, letting the quiet moment stretch out, holding Evan in a space where time seemed to stop. It was a shared secret, a small, unexpected connection in a very busy place. Evan felt a pull, a curiosity about this quiet man who had appeared like an angel in his rush. Evan had taken his passport, clutching it tight in his free hand, but Marcus's hand still rested on his wrist. It wasn't a tight grip anymore, more like a gentle hold, a silent anchor in the rushing river of the airport. Evan looked at his wrist, then up at Marcus, confused but also strangely calm. Why hadn't he let go? The world around them was a blur of noise and movement. People rushed by, their voices a mix of happy hellos and hurried goodbyes. Suitcases rumbled past on their tiny wheels, and the announcements over the speakers were a constant, low buzz. Yet, in the middle of all this chaos, Evan and Marcus stood still. It was like they were inside a magic bubble, where everything else faded away. Marcus's eyes, those kind brown eyes, looked into Evan's. There was no hurry in his gaze, no demand, just a quiet, deep look. Evan felt a warmth spread from Marcus's fingers, up his arm, and into his chest. It was a strange feeling, both new and somehow familiar, like finding a forgotten toy you loved. His heart, which had been pounding like a drum just moments ago, now beat a soft, steady rhythm. Evan didn't try to pull his hand away. He just let it stay there, held by this stranger. It felt good, like a moment stolen from time, a pause button pressed on his crazy, late-for-a-flight day. He studied Marcus's face. There was a tiny scar just above his left eyebrow, almost hidden. His hair was a little messy, like he'd just run his fingers through it. He smelled faintly of fresh air and something else, something warm and nice that Evan couldn't quite place. In this quiet moment, Evan forgot about his flight, about the gate closing, about all the reasons he had been rushing. All that mattered was the steady warmth on his wrist and the kind eyes of the man holding it. It was an unexpected stop, a detour he hadn't planned, but one that felt strangely right. He wondered what Marcus was thinking, why he was still holding on. Was he waiting for Evan to say something more? Or was he, too, caught in this strange, silent spell? The silence stretched, not awkward, but full of something unspoken. It was a language of touch and gaze, a secret conversation only they understood. Evan felt a tingling sensation, like a gentle electric current passing between them. He felt seen, truly seen, not just as a blurry person rushing by, but as Evan. He wanted to say something, anything, to break the quiet, but no words came. His mind was clear, peaceful, a calm lake after a big storm. He just stood there, letting the moment be, letting Marcus hold his wrist, letting time stand still. The airport was a giant, humming beast, constantly moving and making noise. Around Evan and Marcus, life rushed on without a care. A lady with a bright red scarf hurried past, pulling a suitcase that wobbled on one wheel. A group of teenagers laughed loudly, their excited voices echoing off the high ceilings. Over the loudspeakers, a calm voice announced, "Flight 417 to Denver is now boarding at Gate C-22. Then, last call for Flight 78 to Miami, Gate A9." But none of it touched Evan or Marcus. They stood like two statues in a river, unmoving, while everything else flowed around them. Marcus's hand on Evan's wrist was the only thing that felt real, a small, warm spot in a world of rushing cold. Evan could feel the gentle pulse of Marcus's thumb against his skin, a soft, steady rhythm that matched his own slowing heartbeat. He watched a little girl, no older than 5, skip past them, her tiny pink backpack almost as big as she was. Her dad walked behind her, talking on his phone, not even noticing the two men standing still in the stream of people. It was as if Evan and Marcus had become invisible, or perhaps they had simply stepped outside of time. Evan found himself taking a deep breath, a full breath that felt different from the short, hurried gas he'd been taking moments before. The air smelled of airplane fuel, stale coffee, and a hint of something sweet from the candy shop nearby. For the first time since he'd arrived at the airport, Evan truly smelled it, truly heard it, truly felt it. He was not just rushing through it. He was in it, experiencing it, but from a calm, quiet place. Marcus's kind eyes never left Evan's. They held a silent question, or maybe just a shared moment of peace. Evan wondered what Marcus was thinking. Did he often stop in the middle of busy places just to watch the world go by? Or was this moment special for him too? The thought made a strange, fluttery feeling start in Evan's stomach. The urgency that had gripped Evan's chest like a tight fist had loosened its hold. His flight, his gait, the time, it all seemed far away, like a dream he had almost forgotten. He was just here, now, with this stranger, connected by a touch that felt both simple and deeply important. It was a stolen moment, a gift of stillness in a place built for speed. And Evan, for now, was happy to just receive it. The warmth from Marcus's hand on Evan's wrist wasn't just on his skin anymore. It had spread, like warm water filling a cup, flowing gently through his veins. It went up his arm, across his shoulder, and settled right in the middle of his chest. It felt like a cozy blanket on a cold day, a feeling of safety and comfort. It was a surprising feeling to get from a complete stranger in a busy airport. But it was more than just warmth. It was a strange sense of knowing. Evan felt like he knew Marcus, even though they had never met before. It was as if a tiny thread, invisible and strong, had always connected them, and now, for the first time, that thread had tightened. He felt a quiet understanding, a feeling that Marcus somehow saw him, truly saw the person Evan was beyond the hurried traveler. Marcus's eyes, those deep brown pools, held a soft glow. Evan saw kindness there, and patience, and maybe even a hint of something sad, like a story hidden deep inside. But mostly, he saw a peaceful calm that Evan wished he could carry with him every day. It was a look that seemed to say, "It's okay. You're okay." Evan wondered if Marcus felt it too, this odd connection. Did his hand feel a spark when it touched Evan's wrist? Did he feel like he had met someone important, someone he was meant to meet? Evan hoped so. He hoped this wasn't just a one-sided feeling. A little smile tugged at the corner of Evan's lips, a tiny, unplanned smile that came from deep inside. He hadn't smiled properly in hours, maybe even days, lost in the busyness of his life. But Marcus's quiet presence, his gentle touch, had brought it out. It felt light and free, a small burst of joy. He wanted to reach out and touch Marcus's other hand, to see if the spark would jump there too. He wanted to ask him 100 questions. Who are you? Where are you going? Why did you stop me? Do you feel this too? But the words stayed locked away. The quiet felt too precious to break, too fragile. This moment, this strange, unexpected meeting, felt like a secret gift. It was a little bit of magic in the middle of a very ordinary, very rushed day. Evan felt a lightness he hadn't known he was missing. It was as if Marcus, with just a touch, had smoothed out all the wrinkles in Evan's hurried heart. He just stood there, letting the warm feeling grow, letting this new, unspoken understanding settle between them, holding onto it tightly in the busy, loud airport. In the quiet bubble around them, with Marcus's hand still gently holding his wrist, Evan began to truly see the stranger. It was as if a fast-moving movie had suddenly switched to slow motion, allowing him to notice every tiny detail. Marcus's shirt, he now saw, was a soft, pale green, the color of new spring leaves. It looked comfortable, a little wrinkled, like it had been worn for a while, but was still well-loved. Evan's eyes traveled to Marcus's face. There was a faint smile playing on his lips, a gentle curve that didn't quite reach his eyes, but softened his whole face. It was a kind smile, a knowing smile, as if he understood something important that Evan didn't. His brown eyes, warm and deep, seemed to hold stories that Evan wanted to hear. Tiny lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes, showing he often laughed or smiled. Time, which had been Evan's biggest enemy just moments ago, now felt like a friend. It stretched out, slow and unhurried. The frantic ticking of the airport clocks seemed to fade into the background. Each second felt longer, fuller, filled with the quiet hum of their shared moment. He noticed the way Marcus's hair fell slightly over his forehead, a few strands lighter than the rest. He saw the small, almost invisible scar near Marcus's eyebrow, a tiny mark that made him seem more real, more human. Evan also noticed the way Marcus stood, relaxed and easy, as if he had nowhere to be, no flight to catch. His shoulders were not hunched, like Evan's often were from carrying his backpack and worries. Marcus seemed open, calm, a stark contrast to Evan's usual hurried self. The longer they stood, the more Evan felt this strange pull. It wasn't just the physical touch, but a feeling that something important was happening, something that would change the shape of his day, maybe even his life. He felt a quiet longing, a wish that this moment wouldn't end. He wanted to stay in this bubble of stillness just a little longer. He swallowed, his throat feeling a little dry. He wanted to speak, to ask Marcus's name, to thank him properly, to understand why this felt so important. But the words still wouldn't come. The silence was too strong, too full of unspoken things. It was a silence that felt heavy, but not in a bad way. Heavy with possibility, with a feeling of deep connection. He just kept looking at Marcus, taking in every small detail, trying to memorize this unexpected moment of grace. Just as Evan felt he could stay in that quiet bubble forever, Marcus's fingers slowly, gently, slipped away from his wrist. The touch, which had been a steady warmth, was gone. It was not a sudden pull, but a soft release, like a leaf floating away from a branch. Evan felt it instantly. A sudden chill rushed over the spot where Marcus's hand had been. It wasn't a cold chill from the air, but a hollow, empty feeling like a light had just been switched off. He blinked, a small gasp catching in his throat. The warmth that had filled his chest quickly faded, leaving behind a faint ache, a sense of something important having ended. Marcus's eyes, still soft and kind, looked at Evan for one last moment. There was a gentle sadness in them, or maybe it was just a quiet understanding. He gave Evan a tiny nod, a small movement that seemed to say goodbye without words. His faint smile remained, a gentle curve that Evan now knew well. The airport noise, which had been a distant hum, suddenly rushed back in. The loud announcements, the rolling suitcases, the chatter of 100 different voices. It all crashed over Evan, pulling him back into the busy, hurried world he had momentarily left. The magic bubble was gone. Evan's hand, now free, felt strangely light and cold. He almost reached out to grab Marcus's hand back, to hold on to that warmth, to keep the quiet moment alive. But he didn't. He just stood there, his arm hanging awkwardly, watching Marcus. Marcus didn't turn away right away. He just stood there for another second, letting Evan look at him. Then, with another small, silent nod, he turned slowly and began to walk away, blending into the crowd. His pale green shirt disappeared among the other colors, his tall figure melting into the sea of people. Evan felt a pang of something sharp and sudden in his heart. It was a mix of confusion and a deep, unexpected loss. He hadn't even learned his name. He hadn't said anything meaningful. He hadn't asked any of his questions. And now, Marcus was gone. The urgency of his flight, which had been forgotten, came rushing back. The clock, which had slowed down, now seemed to speed up, mocking him with its rapid ticks. He was still late, still had a plane to catch. But everything felt different now. The world felt colder, a little less bright, without the unexpected warmth of Marcus's touch. He stood there for a few more seconds, watching the spot where Marcus had been, hoping he might turn back. But he didn't. The moment Marcus's hand left his wrist, Evan felt a cold emptiness. It was as if a part of him had gone missing. He watched Marcus walk away, his tall figure slowly swallowed by the moving crowd. Evan's mind felt fuzzy, a mix of confusion and a deep, unexpected sadness. He still held his passport tightly in his other hand. He had mumbled a quick thank you when Marcus first gave it back, but it felt so small, so not enough for the big thing that had just happened. The words had come out quiet and hurried, almost lost in the airport noise. He wished he had said more. He wished he had said anything else. He looked down at his passport, a simple blue book that had caused such a big stop in his day. It felt heavier now, not just with its importance for his flight, but with the weight of the moment he had just shared. He pushed it into his backpack's special pocket, but it didn't feel as safe there as it had in Marcus's hand. A knot formed in Evan's stomach. He was confused. Why did he feel so sad? This was just a stranger who had done a kind thing. He should be happy, relieved. He almost lost his passport. But instead, his heart felt heavy, like a cloud had settled over it. He looked around the busy airport, but it all seemed dull now. The bright lights didn't sparkle as much. The sound were just noise, not a symphony. He felt a bit lost, standing there alone. The urgency of his flight, which had been a fire in his belly, was now a small, flickering flame. He knew he still had to run, but his legs felt heavy, unwilling to move. He imagined Marcus, somewhere in the crowd, perhaps walking toward his own flight, or maybe just leaving the airport. Would Marcus remember him? Would he think about the quiet moment they shared? Evan hoped so. He hoped he wasn't just another face in the crowd for Marcus. Evan sighed, a long, shaky breath. He felt a longing, a wish to go back to that moment, to that warm touch, to that shared silence. He wanted to understand it, to name it, to hold on to it. But it was gone, a fleeting magic trick in the middle of his busy day. He was left with his passport, his backpack, and a heart full of questions he couldn't answer. He was ready to run again, but something inside him had changed. The race was still on, but the finish line felt different now. With a heavy sigh, Evan finally forced his legs to move. He turned his back on the spot where Marcus had vanished and started to run again, pushing through the bustling airport crowd. His backpack bounced with each hurried step, and the sounds of the airport once again became a loud, rushing river around him. He could hear the faint, far-off announcement for his gate, a last call that spurred him on. But this time his running felt different. The frantic, wild energy was gone, replaced by a dull ache in his chest. His feet moved fast, but his mind lingered behind, caught in the quiet moment he had just shared. The warmth of Marcus's hand on his wrist was a ghost feeling, a faint tingle that stayed with him, even as the chill of its absence settled deep. He weaved around a family with a stroller, then dodged a businessman on his phone. Each person he passed was just a blur. But in his mind, Marcus's face was perfectly clear. The kind eyes, the faint smile, the soft green shirt. He could still feel the pulse of Marcus's thumb against his skin, a steady beat that had calmed his own racing heart. Evan reached his gate just as the last few passengers were lining up. He handed his passport and ticket to the lady at the counter, his movements stiff and automatic. She checked his papers, her eyes barely glancing at him, before waving him through. He walked down the long tunnel towards the airplane, the metal walls humming around him. As he found his seat and buckled in, Evan looked out the small window. The huge airport stretched out below, a maze of lights and moving dots. He tried to spot the pale green shirt, tried to imagine where Marcus might be now. Was he on another flight? Was he already home? The plane began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Evan leaned his head against the window, the vibration of the engines a low rumble. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, Marcus's face appeared again. The quiet moment, the stolen time, the electric intimacy of their chance encounter. It all played over and over in his mind. He wondered about Marcus's story, about the gentle sadness he thought he saw in his eyes. He wondered if he would ever meet him again. It felt silly, this strong feeling for a stranger he'd only known for a few short minutes. But it was real. It was a beautiful, surprising stop in his hurried life, a reminder that sometimes the most important moments aren't planned at all. As the plane lifted into the sky, leaving the busy airport behind, Evan knew one thing for sure. He might be on his way to his destination, but a piece of his heart was still back there, held in a silent moment with a stranger, making him wonder about the magic of chance and the warmth of an unexpected touch.